with the first one was Abraham, who, and I looked in Exodus, who at the age of 75 left the land which he had lived all his life with all his relatives and friends, and went to a land he didn't know where God was leading him, went out by faith into an unknown place. And I thought, what a marvelous witness to our faith that is, because a lot of us went out at that stage of life into a new place and didn't know exactly where God was leading us. I was in my 70s when I came to Pilgrim Place from San Francisco. And if we were talking to an American audience, the writer would be appealing to those prominent in our own history to think of the witnesses that to whom we turn for inspiration in the difficult places of our life. Lincoln and Washington. Or we would think of the heroes of our faith in our own lifetime. I remember reading the works of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and reading the books and writings of Albert Schweitzer and of the great Japanese saintly man, Kagawa. But in that host of witnesses that we summon up as inspiration to our lives when we are going through difficult times, we are often called to remember those who at various points in our life gave us direction and purpose, comforted us in our sorrow, directed us in difficult times to have courage and persevere. Who is in your cloud? Who is in your personal cloud of witnesses? Who do you vividly remember as great inspirers of your life at various times? Well, of course, first of all, I would think of my parents. My father, a stern, strict New Englander who guided me and warned me about the dangers of life and called upon me at all costs ever to be honest. And of course, being a Yankee, to work hard, to always work hard. Yeah. And if I gave my word, it was my sacred bond. And although my father and I had conflicts and came head to head on many issues, and first of all, of course, when I came home and told him that I was leaving business and going to seminary to be a minister, my father said, "Oh, a minister? You'll always be poor. And you'll always be at everybody's beck and call. Your life will never be your own." I said, "Daddy, you're right. That's exactly what it's all about. When you go into the ministry, you are the servant of your community and your church." Well, in spite of their differences, many years later, when my dad was in his 80s and I was in my 50s, and he and I were sitting on the porch, rocking back and forth in a hot New England summer on the porch of a big old house in New England. And I looked over at my dad and he was crying. And I said, "What's the matter, Daddy?" He said, "I wasn't a very good father, was I?" And I jumped out of my chair and ran and put my arms around him and hugged him. And I said, "You were a wonderful father." He said, "Yes, but I opposed your going into the ministry." And I said, "That's all right, Daddy. You gave me a lot of wonderful truths to live by, to give my word as a sacred bond, to be honest at all times. You gave me the fabric of my life, and I'll always be grateful to you." And I hugged him and hugged him. Well, maybe you've had similar experiences of remembering at times in your life that someone gave you purpose and direction and comfort. And of course, we think of teachers. My granddaughter just graduated from Ohio Wesleyan in June of this past year and set out to be a kindergarten teacher in a country school in rural Ohio. And she has 20 little kindergartners who are experiencing school for the first time. And I said, how many come into your class the first day and were crying because they were frightened and had left home for the first time? She said, only 2, Grandpa, only 2. The rest of them were all smiles and eager to learn. Well, then I thought, in my cloud of witnesses, yes, I remember my kindergarten teacher. I can just remember she was Mrs. McKnight. She was from Scotland, and she was tall and had bright blue eyes and had a wonderful smile, and she made us all feel welcome and made us joyful to learn all the principles of beginning to learn to read. And I did remember her. She is in my cloud of witnesses. And then all along the line, there were wonderful teachers who inspired me. I think of my philosophy teacher in college, and we were probing all the different philosophies of life, and he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, don't be afraid of the increasing field of knowledge and science. Don't look upon science as the enemy of your religion, but look upon science as expanding your knowledge of the earth. The more we know, the more we know of God. That was a wonderful saying that I kept with me all my life, that as we learn about the complexity of the universe, we are really learning about the mind and nature of God. And then, of course, I hope that each of us had a minister or a priest or a rabbi, some religious teacher who inspired us and gave us a vision of how we could serve and be a means of justice and truth in the world. I know that Dan Janung and I share a common inspirer and witness, and that's Art Cassidy. Art Cassidy was a big, husky guy who played football for USC, was stricken with polio, and rendered helpless, and all the rest of his life walked on 2 crutches, but became a tremendous force for good and inspiration to young people. I had him come many summers and speak at my camp. He had a sense of the presence of God, and he had a passion for peace that inspired everybody who heard him. And Alan Hunter,